For more than 2 millennia, one question about woolly mammoths seemed permanently unanswerable. Not their size or Ice Age survival, but their true biological ancestry, their relation to modern elephants, and the genetic reasons for their extinction. Conflicting fossil classifications and hybrid theories assumed close elephant kinship, symbolizing evolutionary adaptation to frigid tundras, yet the behemoth whose woolly traits defined cold endurance could never have passed a modern genetic viability test. Then in 2021, a DNA study on million-year-old mammoths produced a result so contradictory it made headlines around the world. And in 2025, a breakthrough in ancient RNA and full chromosomal sequencing tied to de-extinction efforts delivered an answer no one expected. But the answer wasn't what the headline said. It was stranger. To understand what those sequences revealed, you have to go back to the frozen steppes of Pleistocene Eurasia and North America, from about 2.6 million to 4,000 years ago. Amid advancing glaciers and vast grasslands, woolly mammoths emerged as cold-adapted giants, their shaggy coats and layered fat insulating against sub-zero winds. Herds migrated across continents, preserved remarkably in Siberian permafrost, entire carcasses with fur, skin, and even stomach contents intact, while roaming alongside early humans, saber-toothed tigers, and other megafauna. Their curved tusks reached up to 13 feet, tools for foraging under snow and defending against predators. Thousands of fossils have been unearthed, from Siberia's Yana River sites to Yukon's Klondike goldfields, painting a picture of a highly social species that painted cave walls and left footprints in the mud. First classified as Elephas primigenius in 1799 by naturalist Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, they were seen as ancient relatives of modern elephants, presumed to descend from steppe mammoths that crossed the Beringia land bridge during low sea levels. This migration allowed them to colonize North America, where they overlapped with Columbian mammoths in hybrid zones. But as the Ice Age ended around 11,700 years ago, rising temperatures thawed habitats, shrinking food sources, and intensifying human hunting pressure. The last population clung to Wrangel Island off Siberia's coast, surviving until about 4,000 years ago. They eventually succumbed to isolation, climate shifts, and inbreeding that reduced genetic diversity. Early paleontological debates highlighted anomalies, distinct woolly features, like small ears to minimize heat loss and a hump of fat for energy reserves, hinted at unique adaptations beyond simple elephant kinship. Some 19th century scholars whispered of separate origins, but without genetic tools, these ideas were marginalized. For over 2 centuries, the question loomed like a shadow over the tundra. Are woolly mammoths direct ancestors of modern elephants, or a separate lineage with hidden genetic flaws? The iconic Ice Age herbivore, whose trumpet calls echoed across frozen plains, carried the ultimate mystery of doomed evolutionary bloodlines. In an epic of relentless adaptation, their resilience masked vulnerabilities. No living kin, no complete genome, until recent breakthroughs that unanswered puzzle challenged our grasp of proboscidean family trees, awaiting DNA to expose the fragility beneath the fur. After their discovery, 19th and 20th century classifications treated woolly mammoths as close kin, or even a subspecies of Asian elephants, Elephas maximus. Based on skeletal similarities, including robust limbs, molar ridges for grinding tough vegetation, and spiraled tusk structures, paleontologists like Blumenbach and later Henry Fairfield Osborn at the American Museum of Natural History grouped them firmly in the Elephantidae family. This perspective echoed in textbooks, museum reconstructions, and popular culture, including the endearing Manny in the Ice Age film series, portrayed as a gruff but relatable elephant ancestor. Later theories proposed hybrid origins with Columbian mammoths in North America, or distant affinities to African elephants, Loxodonta africana, based on subtle dental divergences. Mainstream paleontologists dismissed these divergent ideas for centuries. Without molecular evidence, reliance on morphology, meaning bone measurements and enamel patterns, appeared adequate, and outliers were attributed to environmental variation within the mammoth clade. Viable interbreeding with living elephants was assumed, given shared chromosomal counts and anatomical parallels. And so the mystery remained open but quiet, while the elephant kin assumption persisted in every museum exhibit and textbook. Then came the DNA. In 2021, a pioneering study published in Nature, led by evolutionary biologist Tom van der Valk from Uppsala University and SciLife Lab in Sweden, sequenced nuclear DNA from 3 mammoth molars recovered in northeastern Siberia. The specimens were dated between 1.65 million and 700,000 years old, and they represented some of the oldest genomic material ever retrieved, extracted using cutting-edge techniques to amplify degraded fragments. The results were unexpected. The haplogroups unveiled a deep divergence, with the mammoth lineage splitting into woolly and Columbian branches around 1.5 million years ago. Early North American populations showed hybrid admixture between these lines, but there was no direct ancestral link to modern elephants beyond a shared common ancestor millions of years earlier. Headlines erupted, saying million-year-old mammoth DNA rewrites the elephant family tree. It revolutionized paleogenomics. For the first time, ancient DNA bridged the gap to the early Pleistocene, illustrating how mammoths diversified across continents through migration and occasional mixing. But the story was more complicated than any headline could contain. Preservation challenges were immense. Permafrost degradation from climate change risked contaminating samples with modern microbes, and it required rigorous decontamination protocols. The nuclear coverage was limited. Only partial genomes were assembled, and that left gaps in understanding extinction drivers. Admixture explained some diversity, but questions about inbreeding and genetic health remained open because the study focused more on phylogeny than on functional genes. Provocative as it was not fully conclusive, and it ignited calls for deeper sequencing to probe the vulnerabilities that doomed the species. The field needed full mammoth genomes and beyond. For over 2 centuries, that seemed impossible. In 2025, advanced full genome and RNA sequencing was conducted on well-preserved tissues from 40,000 to 52,000 years old woolly mammoths, including skin and muscle samples from Siberia's Liakovsky Island. The effort was led by geneticist Dr. Love Dalen and his collaborative team at Stockholm University and the University of Copenhagen, building on the 2024 3D chromosome assembly work by Erez Lieberman-Aden and Olga Dudchenko at Baylor College of Medicine, which mapped mammoth chromosomes for the first time, and 2025 breakthroughs in ancient RNA recovery from permafrost specimens. They compared the sequences against confirmed ancient and modern elephant reference genomes from Asian and African elephants, plus de-extinction proxies like hybrid cell lines from Colossal Biosciences. The chromosomal markers matched in part to the broader Elephantidae family. This was the moment the 2-century-old question began to crack open. The match meant 2 things simultaneously. First, the sequences were genuinely Pleistocene era, with preserved 3D chromosomal structures and functional RNA transcripts, uncontaminated and carbon-dated accurately. Second, the lineage ran consistent with a distinct cold-adapted branch, closer to Asian elephants genetically, but divergent with unique woolly-specific genes. The Elephantidae divergence was confirmed at around 5 to 6 million years ago. If woolly mammoths had been direct ancestors of modern elephants, sharing recent ancestry or extensive gene flow, the markers would have shown closer alignment without the observed isolation. Instead, the data revealed low genetic diversity and inbreeding signals, particularly in later populations. This authenticated the species' evolutionary solitude, with no widespread hybrids with other proboscideans beyond rare Columbian crosses, and it closed the direct ancestor theory forever. Woolly traits, like thick fur and fat layers, proved to be specialized adaptations from mutations, not inherited from shared elephant stock, while rare hybrids with Columbians were limited to early North American frontiers. The question was finally resolved, exposing how genetic bottlenecks and isolation sealed their fate, and informing de-extinction ethics. But the DNA had more to say. Further findings from the same 2025 sequencing confirmed woolly adaptations through specific mutations. Genes like KRT75 for keratin in thick fur and FGF5 for prolonged hair growth appeared alongside TRPV3 variants for cold tolerance. Small ears reduced heat loss, and enhanced fat storage via LiPE and adipocu helped surviving Arctic famines. Traces of hybridization appeared as minor admixture with Columbian mammoths in North American samples, consistent with Beringia migrations around 1.2 million years ago. Adding some genetic diversity, but not enough to prevent decline. There were no elephant-viable markers, no shared resilience genes for modern tropical climates. The profile was purely divergent, laden with inbreeding-linked deleterious mutations that accumulated in isolated herds. These findings tied directly to the paleo-ecological context. Subtle traits, like reduced olfactory genes adapted to sparse tundra vegetation, aligned with known Pleistocene proboscidean studies from sites like Barilek. Tundra adaptations shaped their senses and diets. Wrangel Island's final population, cut off for 6,000 years, exemplified this. Genomic data showed severe inbreeding depression, leading to reduced fertility and eventual extinction despite no predators. Paleogeneticist Dr. Love Dalen called the finding personally and evolutionarily significant after decades of research. She said no one had pinpointed why mammoths could not rebound. Now we see their specialized genome was a double-edged sword, thriving in ice but fragile in thaw. The revelations deepened extinction narratives. The giants that shaped ecosystems carried a blueprint as vulnerable as the permafrost preserving them. When the documentary titled Mammoth DNA, Blueprint of the Ice Age Giant aired on Channel 4 in March 2026, criticism was immediate and fierce. Paleogeneticist Dr. Beth Shapiro at University of California, Santa Cruz called it a deluge of misinformation and bad science. Ethicist Professor Henry Greeley from Stanford University warned of the ethical nightmare of exploiting ancient DNA for de-extinction hype. Critics like Eleftheria Palkopoulou at SciLife Lab questioned whether chromosomal analysis added meaningful insight to a species already extensively fossilized. The deeper objection was ethical. By linking the sequencing to revival projects such as Colossal Biosciences' elephant-mammoth hybrids, the documentary risked misleading the public on extinct species revival. True resurrections are impossible without restoring Ice Age ecosystems. It verged on sensationalizing evolutionary history without grappling with climate change implications or animal welfare and genetic engineering. What remains after the headlines and the controversy is something quieter and more durable. The giant assumed kin to modern elephants carried a fully distinct, fully ancient proboscidean ancestry that would have defied every assumption of its own era. Not because of misclassified fossils, not because of pop culture rumors, but because its own bloodline was exactly what evolution hid, adapted, yet fragile, and still 100% mammoth. Dr. Love Dalen said it plainly. If a woolly mammoth could examine its own genetic results without knowing whose they were, it would see a survivor engineered for an ice world that vanished, dooming its kind to fade. Today, the permafrost fossils and genomes still exist, thawing under warming skies. The research awaits full peer review. The tusks still curve in museum cases. If the woolly mammoth's DNA tells us anything definitive, it may be this. The obsession with pure ancestral bloodlines in evolution was always more complicated than anyone imagined. If you want more stories where DNA flips paleontology and extinction on its head, hit subscribe. The next one is even crazier than this.